Zyla's sleek blue fingers danced across the console in her cramped quarters. As one of the few humanoids from the aquatic race of Lyrian Prime aboard the station, she was used to solitude. Most of her species disliked deep space, preferring their water-filled homes. But not Zyla. She craved adventure, the kind that led her to the frontiers of the galaxy, to the fringes where laws were loose and mysteries abundant. Her latest assignment, however, felt like drudgery, tediously cataloguing cargo shipments from passing freighters, each container holding the promise of intrigue but delivering only the dull thud of routine. Hours of monotony with the occasional intrigue of contraband. Tonight, though, something felt different. There was a hum in the air, an unspoken tension that clung to the walls of the station. Zyla brushed it off. Space stations often carried a strange energy, amplified by the diverse species inhabiting them. She decided to take a break, her footsteps echoing softly as she ventured down the dimly lit corridors of the station. The shifting shadows seemed almost alive, their movements hinting at unseen watchers in the faint glow of the overhead lights. Her feet padded softly on the metal grates, the sound barely audible over the hum of machinery. She had a destination in mind, the crew lounge, where a human she had only recently met was said to frequent. Humans were rare in this part of the galaxy. Their curiosity and reckless bravery had earned them both admiration and disdain from other species. His name was Elias. He'd arrived on the station a week ago, part of some trade envoy, though he spent more time tinkering with tools and machines than engaging in diplomatic duties. Zyla found him fascinating. There was a ruggedness to him, a rawness that was uncommon among the more refined species she typically encountered. She was drawn to his unpredictability, though she'd never admit it outright. As she neared the lounge, she noticed the door was slightly ajar. A soft snoring sound came from within. Curiosity piqued, Zyla peeked inside. Her large, aquatic eyes adjusted quickly to the dim light, and there he was, Elias, sprawled out on the couch, tools scattered around him, his chest rising and falling with the rhythm of sleep. Zyla hesitated at the threshold. It wasn't uncommon for humans to fall asleep in odd places, but something about the scene felt intimate. She stepped closer, her gaze drawn to the strange, metallic device clutched loosely in his hand. The tool was unlike anything she'd seen before, sleek, with faintly glowing inscriptions running along its surface. It pulsed faintly, as if alive. She leaned closer, her curiosity overriding her caution. The inscriptions seemed to shift under her gaze, forming symbols that were tantalizingly familiar yet maddeningly indecipherable. The tool, whatever it was, radiated a strange energy that prickled her skin, a tingling sensation that seemed to whisper secrets in a language just beyond her understanding, pulling her deeper into its enigma. Zyla's fingers hovered over it, an itch to touch it growing stronger by the second. Her fingers barely grazed the cool, metallic surface when Elias stirred, his breath catching sharply. The faint murmur that escaped his lips was tinged with something. Was it fear? Or something deeper? His eyes fluttered open, and for a brief moment, confusion clouded his face. Then, recognition. Zyla, he murmured, his voice rough with sleep. He blinked, sitting up abruptly and nearly dropping the tool. "What are you doing here?" Caught off guard, Zyla straightened, her usual composure slipping. I was just passing by." The door was open. Elias's eyes narrowed slightly, though there was no anger in his gaze, only curiosity. He glanced down at the tool in his hand, then back at her. "You were curious, weren't you? About this?" She hesitated, then nodded. There was no point in denying it. "What is it?" He leaned back, a slow grin spreading across his face. This is my project. Let's just say it's a bit of human ingenuity mixed with, well, something else." Zyla's interest sharpened, her mind racing with possibilities. "Something else?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly, as though the air between them held something fragile and profound. Elias's grin faded slightly, replaced by a more serious expression. "Yeah. It's complicated. Not something I can talk about openly." The cryptic response only fueled her curiosity. "Why not?" He hesitated, his gaze flickering to the tool, then back to her. "Because it's not exactly legal. At least not by galactic standards. The admission sent a thrill through Xyla. She'd always been drawn to the edges of the law, to the grey areas where morality and necessity blurred. And yet you brought it here. Elias shrugged, a mischievous glint in his eye. What can I say? I like living dangerously. Xyla couldn't help but smile. She liked that about humans, their boldness, their refusal to conform. But the tool's mysterious nature nagged at her. What does it do? Elias's smile faded entirely. He glanced around, as if ensuring they were alone, then leaned closer. It's better if you don't know. Trust me. The words were meant to deter her, but they had the opposite effect. Suspense hung heavy in the air, thick enough to cut with a blade. Xyla's mind raced with possibilities. What could be so dangerous, so secretive, that even Elias, with his brash demeanor, hesitated to speak of it? Before she could press further, a low, metallic clang echoed down the corridor, sharp and deliberate. The sound rippled through the still air, its weight pressing against her chest and sending an involuntary shiver through her spine. Both of them tensed, their gazes snapping to the door. The sound was faint but unmistakable, footsteps, deliberate and heavy, drawing closer. Elias's expression shifted, a flicker of fear crossing his face. He stood abruptly, shoving the tool into a compartment on his belt. You need to leave. Now. Xyla frowned, her instincts screaming against retreating. What's going on? Who's out there? Elias shook his head, his urgency palpable. No time to explain. Just go. But before she could move, the door slid open, revealing a towering figure clad in dark armor. The intruder's face was hidden behind a dark, reflective helmet, but their towering frame and the deliberate precision of their movements radiated a calculated menace, like a predator toying with its prey. A deep, distorted voice broke the tense silence. Hand it over, human. Elias's jaw tightened. I don't know what you're talking about. The figure took a step closer, the weight of their presence suffocating. Don't play games. You know what I want. Xyla's heart raced. She didn't know who this intruder was or what they wanted, but one thing was clear: Elias's mysterious tool had just thrust them both into a dangerous game, one with stakes she couldn't yet fathom. Xyla froze, her breath hitching as her mind raced through possibilities, the intruder's distorted voice reverberating through the cramped room with a menace that clawed at her nerves. Elias stood beside her, every muscle in his body taut, his hand instinctively moving to shield the compartment on his belt. The tension coiled around them, an oppressive weight that seemed to thicken the air, making every breath feel like an act of defiance. You've made a mistake, Elias said, his voice calm but laced with defiance. There's nothing here for you. The intruder didn't respond immediately. Instead, they tilted their helmet slightly, as though analyzing the two of them. Xyla's instincts screamed at her to act, to flee, to do anything other than stand rooted to the spot. But her curiosity overrode her fear. Who was this intruder, and what did they want with Elias's mysterious tool? Step aside, the intruder finally growled, a faint mechanical whine accompanying their words. This doesn't concern you. It does now, Xyla said before she could stop herself. Her voice was firm, bolder than she felt inside. Her words drew the intruder's attention like a spotlight, and for a moment, the helmet's reflective surface seemed to glimmer menacingly in her direction. Elias shot her a quick, alarmed glance but said nothing. The intruder's stance shifted slightly, a hand moving to the hilt of a weapon strapped to their side. The movement was slow, deliberate, a warning as much as a threat. Enough, Elias said sharply, stepping forward and raising his hands. Look, I don't know who sent you, but you're wasting your time. This isn't what you think it is. You're lying, the intruder hissed, their voice dripping with contempt. That device is more dangerous than you can comprehend. Hand it over, or I'll take it by force. Xyla's gaze flicked to Elias. His face was set, his jaw clenched tightly. Whatever this tool was, it was clearly more than just a piece of human ingenuity. The atmosphere in the room crackled with impending violence, and she knew they were teetering on the edge of chaos. Before she could think of a plan, Elias's hand moved in a blur. He pressed a hidden button on his belt, and the tool emitted a sudden pulse of energy. The room vibrated faintly, and the intruder staggered back a step, their weapon halfway out of its holster. Run. Elias shouted, grabbing Zyla's arm and pulling her toward the door. She stumbled after him, her mind reeling as the sound of heavy boots pounding behind them filled the air. The corridors blurred as they ran, Elias leading her through a labyrinth of narrow passages. The station's dim lighting flickered erratically, the shadows twisting and writhing like phantom limbs reaching for them. Zyla's heart hammered in her chest, her breathing ragged as adrenaline coursed through her veins. What the hell was that? She managed to gasp as they rounded a corner. Later, Elias snapped, his jaw tight and his eyes darting nervously, the weight of urgency palpable in his voice. His tone brooked no argument, and Zyla clamped her mouth shut, focusing instead on keeping up with his frantic pace. They burst into a maintenance bay, the space cluttered with tools, spare parts, and half-disassembled machinery. Elias shoved her behind a large crate and crouched beside her, his chest heaving as he caught his breath. The faint sound of the intruder's pursuit echoed in the distance, growing louder with every passing second. "We're out of options," Elias muttered, pulling the tool from his belt. He examined it for a brief moment, his brow furrowed in concentration. This wasn't supposed to happen. Zyla's frustration boiled over. What wasn't supposed to happen? "What is that thing, Elias?" He hesitated, glancing at her before returning his attention to the device. "It's a prototype," he admitted finally. "An experimental piece of tech my team back on Earth developed. It wasn't supposed to leave the lab, but I had my reasons." Zyla's eyes narrowed. "Your reasons? You mean stealing something illegal and bringing it out here where every bounty hunter in the galaxy wants to kill us for it?" Elias flinched at her accusation, a shadow of guilt flickering across his face, but he didn't deny it. "It's not that simple. This device, it's more than just a tool. It's a key." "A key? To what?" He hesitated again, and Zyla's patience shattered. She grabbed his arm, her grip firm as she locked eyes with him, her voice trembling with frustration. "To what, Elias?" "To a power source," he said quietly. "An ancient energy that predates humanity, predates most of the known galaxy, actually. My team discovered traces of it buried in the ruins of a forgotten world. This tool was designed to interface with it, to unlock its secrets." Zyla's mind raced as she processed his words. "And you thought it was a good idea to bring that here? Do you have any idea what you've done?" Elias opened his mouth to respond, but a sudden crash interrupted him. The crate they were hiding behind shuddered as something heavy slammed into it. Zyla's heart leapt into her throat as she peeked around the edge. The intruder had found them. "No more running," the distorted voice growled. The intruder strode into the bay, the sharp clack of their boots echoing against the metal floor, each deliberate step amplifying the aura of controlled menace. "You've run out of time." Elias's grip on the tool tightened. "If you're here for the device, you're making a mistake," he said, his voice steady despite the tension in his posture. "You don't know what you're dealing with." "And you do," the intruder sneered. "Humans think they can meddle with forces beyond their understanding. It's always the same arrogance." Zyla's mind raced as she scanned the bay for anything they could use to their advantage. Her gaze darted to a nearby console, its interface flickering faintly, a fragile glimmer of hope amidst the chaos, promising a chance to turn the tide if she acted quickly. She nudged Elias, her eyes darting toward it. He followed her gaze and gave a slight nod, understanding her plan instantly. "You're right," Elias said, his tone suddenly calmer, almost resigned. "Maybe humans are arrogant. Maybe we don't know when to stop. But that doesn't mean we're going to hand over something we don't fully understand to someone like you." The intruder stepped closer, their weapon trained on Elias. "Then you leave me no choice." In a blur of motion, Zyla darted toward the console, her fingers flying across the controls. The bay's automated systems hummed to life, and a series of mechanical arms sprang into motion. The intruder spun toward her, but it was too late. One of the arms swung down, knocking the weapon from their grasp. Another clamped onto their shoulder, pinning them in place. "Now!" Zyla shouted. Elias didn't hesitate. He lunged forward, slamming the tool against the intruder's armor. A surge of energy crackled through the air, and the intruder let out a strangled cry as their suit short-circuited, sparks flying from the joints. The intruder crumpled to the floor, their body convulsing violently before going limp, the acrid tang of burned circuitry filling the room as silence settled uneasily over them. Xyla and Elias stared at the figure for a moment, their breathing ragged. "Is it over?" Xyla asked, her voice trembling. Elias shook his head. "Not even close." He turned the tool over in his hands, his expression grim. "We've just painted a target on our backs," Elias said grimly, his voice a harsh whisper. "What's coming for us? It's something far beyond anything we've ever faced." Xyla's stomach churned. Whatever they'd just unleashed, she knew their journey was far from over. The station had turned from a sanctuary into a ticking time bomb, its once familiar corridors now cloaked in shadows and vibrating faintly with an ominous hum that hinted at unseen threats. Xyla and Elias moved with purpose, their quick, silent steps blending into the station's ambient hum. Each shadow seemed to twist and shift, teasing the edges of their vision like lurking phantoms. The intruder's still form lingered in the maintenance bay, but Elias knew better than to assume the danger was over. If they'd found him here, others would follow. "Where are we going?" Xyla demanded, her voice taut with barely concealed panic. Her heart pounded in her ears as she struggled to keep her breathing steady, every turn of the cramped corridors tightening her nerves. "The docks," Elias replied. "We need to get off this station before reinforcements arrive." Xyla's mind raced. The device, that cursed, enigmatic device, was now the center of a storm that was rapidly consuming them both. Elias had mentioned an ancient energy source, a power predating most civilizations. Was that why they were being hunted? The implications were staggering. "How long do we have?" she asked, glancing over her shoulder. "Not long," Elias said grimly. "If they tracked me once, they can do it again. We need to move." They emerged into a wide corridor leading to the docking bays, where ships of various shapes and sizes were moored. The area was unsettlingly silent, the air thick with an unnatural stillness. The faint metallic tang of ozone lingered, a stark contrast to the absent cacophony of bustling crew and traders. Xyla's unease deepened. "Something's not right," she murmured. Elias nodded, his grip tightening on the device. "Stay close." They made their way toward a small freighter docked near the far end of the bay. Its hull was scuffed and battered, but Elias's face lit up with recognition. "The Sundown," he said. "She's fast enough to get us out of here." "And the owner?" Xyla asked. "That would be me," Elias replied with a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Come on." They hurried up the boarding ramp, the freighter's interior a maze of cramped corridors and utilitarian furnishings. Elias led her to the cockpit, where he immediately began flipping switches and inputting commands. The ship hummed to life, its systems flickering on with a faint glow. "Strap in," Elias instructed. "This might get rough." Xyla slid into the co-pilot's seat, her eyes scanning the array of unfamiliar controls. "Do you even know where we're going?" "Away," Elias said. "Anywhere but here." The Sundown's engines thundered to life, the ship vibrating beneath them with a deep, resonant hum. As it heaved into the void, the jarring shudder sent a ripple through their bones. Through the viewport, Xyla saw the docking bay shrinking away, the station's skeletal framework fading into the vast expanse of space. Relief began to creep in, but it was short-lived. A blaring alarm shattered the momentary calm. Elias cursed under his breath, his hands flying over the controls. "What now?" Xyla demanded. "We've got company," Elias said, gesturing to the viewport. A sleek, angular vessel had detached from the station and was closing in fast. "Let me guess," Xyla said dryly. "Not here to wish us well?" "Not unless well-wishing involves a missile barrage," Elias quipped. He activated the ship's defense systems, and the cockpit lights dimmed as the targeting computer came online. The enemy ship opened fire, a streak of plasma bolts slicing through the void. Elias threw the Sundown into a series of sharp maneuvers, the freighter's engines straining under the effort. Xyla gripped the armrests of her seat, her stomach lurching with every twist and dive. "Can this thing fight back?" she shouted over the cacophony. "Not much," Elias admitted. "She's built for speed, not combat." "Then we'd better hope you're as good a pilot as you think you are," Xyla said, her voice tinged with both fear and determination. Elias grinned despite the tension. Watch and learn. He veered the Sundown toward a nearby asteroid field, its jagged rocks illuminated by the faint glow of a distant star. The enemy ship followed, its weapons firing relentlessly. Elias pushed the freighter to its limits, weaving through the debris with hair-raising precision. Xyla's knuckles turned white as she held on, her eyes darting between the approaching rocks and the pursuing vessel. Are you trying to get us killed? Not today, Elias replied, narrowly dodging a massive asteroid. Hang on, this is going to get tight. The Sundown plunged deeper into the field, the enemy ship struggling to match its maneuvers. Plasma bolts screamed through the void, slamming into asteroids with deafening explosions that cast blinding bursts of fiery light. Each impact sent tremors through the cockpit, rattling the controls and setting alarms flashing. Elias's focus was absolute, his hands steady on the controls. We can't keep this up forever, Xyla warned, her voice cracking under the strain. She clung to the armrests, her knuckles white as her body braced against the ship's violent lurches. We won't have to, Elias said. See that cluster ahead? Xyla followed his gaze to a dense formation of asteroids, their overlapping orbits creating a chaotic, swirling mass. You're not seriously thinking. I am, Elias interrupted. Hold on. He accelerated toward the cluster, the Sundown's engines screaming in protest. The pursuing ship hesitated, its pilot clearly weighing the risks. Elias seized the moment, diving into the chaos. The freighter bobbed and weaved through the labyrinth of spinning rocks, each movement a calculated gamble. The enemy ship followed but couldn't match the Sundown's agility. A single miscalculated turn sent the enemy ship careening into an asteroid. The collision triggered a deafening explosion, scattering debris and bathing the asteroid field in searing, chaotic light that danced across the Sundown's hull. Xyla let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Nice flying, she admitted, her voice shaky but laced with genuine relief. The adrenaline still coursing through her veins was tempered by the nagging fear of what lay ahead. Told you, Elias said with a wink, though his expression remained tense. But we're not out of this yet. As they cleared the asteroid field, Xyla's thoughts returned to the device. That ship wasn't just after you, was it? It's the key they want. Elias nodded grimly. And they'll keep coming until they get it. So what do we do? Xyla asked. He glanced at her, his eyes serious. We find out what it unlocks, Elias said, his tone heavy with resolve. But we need to be ready. Whatever it is, the cost of keeping it safe will be steep. The Sundown hurtled into the void, the stars stretching endlessly before them. The chase was over, but the real journey was only beginning. The Sundown drifted through the endless expanse of space, its sleek hull glinting faintly in the light of distant stars, a lone vessel carrying the weight of a galaxy's secrets. The battle was behind them, but the weight of what lay ahead pressed heavily on both Xyla and Elias. The device, ancient, enigmatic, and dangerous, rested between them on the cockpit console, its faint glow casting soft shadows over their weary faces. We can't keep running, Xyla said, her voice heavy with exhaustion and resolve. She stared out at the stars, the enormity of their choice etched in her expression. She stared out at the stars, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. This thing, whatever it is, will only bring more chaos if it stays with us. Elias sighed, leaning back in his seat. I know, he said. But giving it up, it feels like handing a loaded weapon to someone we don't trust. Then we need to destroy it, Xyla said firmly, her jaw tightening as she locked eyes with him. Some things are too dangerous to exist, no matter the cost. Her large, expressive eyes bore into his. No one should wield that kind of power. Not humans. Not anyone. Elias hesitated. Destroying the device meant erasing all the secrets it held, secrets that could advance humanity's understanding of the universe by centuries. But it also meant ensuring it couldn't fall into the wrong hands. His internal conflict played out on his face, a war between curiosity and responsibility. You're right, he said at last, his voice heavy with resignation. We have to end this. Xyla nodded, relief washing over her. Where? Elias thought for a moment, then tapped the navigation console. There's a star system not far from here. The primary star is unstable, a red giant on the verge of collapsing. If we drop the device into its core, it'll be destroyed completely. No trace left. Zyla's gaze softened. It's a good plan, she said. But you know they won't stop looking for us, right? Even if it's gone. Elias gave her a small, weary smile. Let them look. At least this way, they'll have nothing to find. The journey to the red giant was quiet, the hum of the engines a constant reminder of their path. Zyla's thoughts swirled with the faces of those who might suffer if they failed, while Elias gripped the console, his mind replaying the warnings they'd ignored. When they finally arrived, the star dominated the viewport, its fiery surface roiling with waves of molten energy. The sheer power of it was humbling. This is it, Elias said, his voice subdued. He unfastened the device from its compartment and held it in his hands for what he knew would be the last time. It's strange, he murmured, turning the device over in his hands. How something so small can hold so much power, and cause so much destruction. Zyla placed a hand on his arm. It's not the device, Zyla said, her voice soft but resolute. It's what we bring to it. Greed, ambition, the need to control, we're the ones who turn it into a weapon. Elias looked at her, a flicker of understanding passing between them. You're right, he said. It's not just about the technology. It's about what we choose to do with it. Together, they moved to the airlock. Elias input the release sequence, and the airlock doors hissed open. The device floated weightlessly for a moment, its faint glow dimming as it drifted into the void, inexorably pulled toward the fiery maw of the red giant. It disappeared into the fiery abyss, consumed by the inferno. For a moment, there was silence. Then, the Sundown's instruments lit up with activity as the star's energy surged, its final death throes triggered by the device's destruction. The star began to collapse, its surface roiling with violent flares of energy. The cockpit lit up with dazzling light as the red giant's final act of destruction loomed. We need to go, Zyla said, urgency sharpening her tone. Elias nodded, guiding the Sundown away from the dying star. The ship's engines roared to life, propelling them to safety just as the star erupted in a blinding explosion. The light consumed the darkness, a final, breathtaking display of destruction and rebirth. Hours later, as the Sundown drifted through calmer space, Zyla and Elias sat in silence. The weight of their actions lingered, but so did a sense of closure. Do you think we did the right thing? Zyla asked, her voice barely a whisper as she studied Elias's face, searching for reassurance. Elias thought for a long moment before answering. I think we made the only choice we could. Sometimes the right thing isn't easy or clear. It's just what has to be done. Zyla nodded, her gaze returning to the stars. Maybe this is a chance for something better. A chance for us to learn from our mistakes. Elias smiled faintly. Maybe it is. The Sundown continued its journey, its destination uncertain but its purpose clear. In the vast, uncharted expanse of the galaxy, Zyla and Elias carried with them a hard-earned lesson. Power without responsibility was a path to ruin, and sometimes, the greatest strength came from letting go. The stars stretched endlessly before them, their silent brilliance a testament to humanity's small place in the universe and its infinite capacity for growth.